Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
And when we get to the end of this podcast, James, we are halfway through Correspondent Week. This is number 10. It's a milestone. True. It feels like a milestone. Do you want to introduce our correspondent for today's show, or this morning's show?
I shall. Probably in your opinion, you might as well just stop after this one anyway. You might not want to turn up for the other 10. Let me introduce you to our West Ham United correspondent, Chris Stone. How are you, Chris?
Yeah, I'm very good. Hope you both well. I'm recovered from your weekends drinking.
It's 2 weekends ago now. You know,
was it 2 weekends ago?
10
Jesus.
Days. Yeah.
God. Of course it was. Yeah. Yes. So yeah. It does.
Right.
But even I was questioning myself. I was like, no, it wasn't. It was this weekend just gone. No, you're absolutely right. It was 10 days ago.
Indeed.
Chris, before we start, just for the benefit of those on YouTube, you've got your new West Ham shirt on. Is it just me? That shirt is giving me huge vibes of a late 90s shirt you had under Harry Redknapp when you finished 5th. It's like almost identical.
Yeah, I think it's based on the Ticanio.
The shirt he wore when he did the volley. So they designed it around.
I tried reenacting it at the weekend, but that went epically wrong.
Is that what it actually said?
What do you do? A hernia? Pull a hamstring.
Yeah.
It's what they said when they bought the kit out. They said they modelled it on nostalgic whatever.
Do you ever see that goal and get really annoyed about the amount of empty seats behind the goal? It bothers me. It really bothers. Shit like that really bothers me.
You've probably seen it more than me.
I hadn't noticed it actually. I must admit, you focus so much on like the pass across from Sinclair, and then obviously. To Canio's finish, but yeah,
it bothers me that arguably the 77th greatest goal in Premier League history doesn't have much of a crowd in the background. It really bothers me.
77,
one of the great goals. Anyway, how you feeling about new season, Chris?
Yeah, I feel all right actually. I mean, I'm not expecting to finish. Anything could happen. It's one of those seasons. Obviously we've got Europe, so that's exciting. We're in the group stages, so we get at least 6 games. So we're guaranteed that whoever we get. So hopefully we get Celtic in the group. in the group.
I doubt it, mate. They'll be in the Europa Conference League. They might not even make that. If they keep losing, they won't even make the Conference League, mate.
True.
But yeah, that'd be good. I mean, obviously the unknown factor is the impact on the league, and obviously our thinning squad, but hopefully there'll be a couple of new arrivals to bolster that before the season starts, just to give us a bit of time. But yeah, at the start of the season, I'm quite optimistic. I mean, at the end of the day, we're starting where we left off last season. There shouldn't be any major change in terms of how we play. It's not really going to be later on until the season, until you're thick into the Europa group games, that maybe you'll start seeing some differences. But overall, I think we've finished well, but it's going to be a hard ask to finish in the top 6 or 7 again. And if we did, that'd be a bigger achievement, I think, than last season.
You're concerned, Suj, aren't you, by the Thursday Sunday gig, aren't you?
Yeah, it's just the unknown nature of it. The unknown nature of it's really interesting. I don't think. We didn't progress particularly far in the cups last year, but we didn't massively rotate. And I don't think I'm interested to see whether we take the Wolves approach, which was literally play the same team week in, week out. Doesn't make a difference whether it's Europa League on a Thursday in the league, or we rotate heavily. We don't have the depth in the squad that we need, but we're not far off. And there is the rumours around the players that we are bringing in. I feel reasonably confident that we'll get the business done. I am concerned, but it's not so much the fact that I don't think we'll be able to cope with it. It's that I don't know how we'll cope with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's always a level of uncertainty at West Ham. You can't take for granted that you had a good season last season, that you're going to have a good season this season, and then you throw in Europe and all the other factors.
I mean, have we ever had 2 good back-to-back seasons? I'm trying to think.
Not that I don't think it's even possible for us to do it. It's not in our DNA.
No.
But I am optimistic. The reason I'm more optimistic is I think because Moyes is a bit more pragmatic. He keeps them down to earth, and I think he'll with what he's got, he'll do the best that we can possibly do with what we've got, whatever that may be. it's a little bit outside of our control, or Moyes' control even, to a degree. But I hope if we can get 2 or 3 players in, like you said on a couple of other things, they don't have to be, the all singing, all dancing star names. They're just players that can either get into the team straight away or on the fringes of the first team. That's what we really need. I think rotation isn't such a problem for us at the moment. It's more if they can stay fit. I think that's the bigger issue.
Picked up a knock at the weekend, and he might not be available at the start of the season. Now we've got cover in goal now. Areola, Fabianski. I think even if we're advising people from an FPL point of view, firstly they're 5 million, stay away. Secondly, we think Fabianski will probably start, but it wouldn't surprise me if Areola starts the season. So just steer clear of it, because there's no way of knowing who will play.
I'd say it's not worth it from an FPL perspective. I think from a personal perspective, I think Fabianski will start. I think Moyes tends to stick with the players that he knows. And when he brings in new players, they tend to, Soucek and Coufal probably been the exceptions, but then Coufal came in because of an injury, and then obviously got into the team because of how good he was. But other players like Bowen, they've taken a while to bed in. They weren't automatically playing 90 minutes, from the first or second game. So I don't think he'll
the same for Benrahma as well. He was eased in last season. Now you said you think we'll pick off the season where we started last season, and I'm not sure. I think last season when we did so well with kind of 5 at the back, with Masuaku playing as the left wing back and Cresswell tucking in, we had a really good run, and then we switched to a 4, partially due to Masuaku's injury, and then he wasn't available. We don't have any other player that can play that role necessarily, but he is fit. So I'm not sure if because he's fit, we might switch to that system potentially, or for certain games we might play with him as well, because Coufal and Masuaku as wing backs with 3 centre backs would be a really solid base to build on. And I'd quite like to see us play with 3 centre backs or 5 at the back, whatever you want to call it, in certain games to have those guys overlapping and attacking.
I think the problem is when I think we will play it in the tougher games. I agree with that, but I think in the whatever an easier game is, I think he would go to a back. He would try and keep a back 4, because because you're playing 2 defensive midfielders. I know Soucek does get forward, he does get you a goal and that kind of thing, but he is essentially a defensive type of player, or box to box. So he's not out and out defensive. But you've got him and Rice, so that's if you throw in a back 5, I know they're wing backs, but then you're effectively playing with sort of 7. You've got 7 players then, isn't it? Plus your keeper. You've only got 3 out and out attacking players. You've got Bowen, Antonio, Benrahma. That means you're potentially dropping Fornals. So it's a tricky one. I think that's why I think he'd probably prefer to try and play a 4 in some of the games. I think he'll switch it. I think he did do that last year. Some of it was enforced, but it's probably giving him a chance to see what we can play. The danger is that we're more solid as a 5, aren't we? We're more resilient. But I think he's quite prepared to play without the ball in terms of possession. We didn't have, even in games we won against some of the weaker teams, we didn't dominate possession in some of the games as much as you would maybe think we might. So he's quite happy to sit back and absorb the pressure and let teams have a go, and then kind of, it's more than just hitting them on the break and the counter attack. There's a little bit more to it than that, but I think that's I think solidity is that's essentially what Moyes is after, isn't he? He's after not conceding, staying in the game.
We didn't keep the but I think the defenders, I don't know what you think, James, but from an FPL point of view, are all fairly priced at the end of the. Cresswell had his set piece threat and picked up a lot of returns, so 5.5 million. Coufal 9 assists is no joke as a fullback, and he did well at 5 million. Agbona, Dawson were threats at set pieces. They both scored goals last season, so they're 5 million, and then everyone else at 4.5. I just think they're all priced where they probably should be, and you might find better players at the same price elsewhere, but they're all priced fairly.
Yeah, I think they're priced on how we did last year, which where quite a lot of the times we've been priced as not even a mid-table team sometimes. So that I wouldn't say there's value there in the prices. Coufal probably the one who could probably, from an FPL perspective, maybe get more. He did well. He did extremely well, but I think he's a little bit maybe even underrated. He could, if a few of those chances that he created turned into goals, that increased his assists. He also has a few shots here and there, not a lot, but he'll have a few shots. So, one or two of those go in, you're looking at another sort of 20 or 30 points, and then you're getting quite a decent return. So he's probably the one. I know everyone goes for Cresswell, and Cresswell's probably got the most potential. I wouldn't say most potential, but you think he's going to get the highest because of his set pieces. But he does only take corners on one side.
Yep.
Obviously, he does take free kicks. In some of the friendlies, Lanzini's been playing, so he's been taking some of the free kicks, and he does like to take free kicks. So you've got that aspect. A lot of people rely on the. I don't think it makes much difference if he was in a 3 or on a 4. He still gets those chances from the corners and the set pieces.
James, have you had any in your draft since you looked at any West Ham defenders at all?
No, but I think you're right. I think that Cresswell 5.5, Coufal 5, Masuaku 4.5, if they're going to play, are all interesting. I think I'm a little bit put off by the fact that you don't have a sustained good fixture spell anywhere, really. Your fixtures are never bad, but they're never great.
No,
either.
that's true.
Yeah.
Don't get one of 4
I'm
5,
also, there's two sides to it. 4.5 Masuaku playing left wing back, which if he's going to play, you that's the system you're going to play. He's not going to play Cresswell centre back and Masuaku left back in a 4, which makes Masuaku dodgy, considering Chris is obviously saying probably ideally a back 4. But if he's going to play, 4.5 is massively interesting. Coufal at 5, 9 assists last year, great. Cresswell 5.5. I said to you pre-season, Suj, before we saw the prices, that if he was 5.5, I would be extremely interested. What I probably didn't expect is the likes of Luca Dean with great fixtures and Luke Shaw massive ownership.
Same price,
drop at the same price. So I think you're right in terms of the fair price. And Cresswell obviously 11 assists. So there's only 2 more than Coufal, despite all the set pieces. So you start questioning if that 0.5 is worth it. The other thing is, and I don't know if there's a kind of stigma about West Ham that's wrong a little bit in terms of defensively solid, because you only kept 1 clean sheet from game week 28 onwards.
It's the stupid leaking of 1 goal here and there.
And that was on the final day against Southampton.
Yeah.
In what was basically a dead rubber.
Yeah.
We did go through that phase, didn't we, of going 2-0 up or 3-0 up and then just conceding goals.
3-0 up was the most dangerous scoreline in the league for West Ham, wasn't
it? It was very frustrating as a fan, for sure.
There's quite a lot of teams on similar sort of clean number of clean sheets, because I was looking at Sky stuff as well. But when you look at the number of clean sheets, I didn't go through every team. I just went through the top ones in terms of fixtures that people might look at. But we had 12 clean. I think we had 11 clean sheets. But then you've got the likes of Brighton, who had 12. Leeds had 12. Tottenham had 12. United had 13. Villa had 15. So arguably, there's teams that have got better clean sheet potential. I guess then you have to look at the attacking returns, and that's when I think maybe Cresswell and Coufal come in. If I suppose you start looking at it from what are the risks. If you pick Cresswell, he always seemed to be one knock or injury away from missing a game, and he always seemed to get over it and be fit. But he's not, he's not old by any stretch of the imagination. But he's past 30, so. Is he gonna last the season? I was surprised how many games he actually played last year. I don't know how many he played in total, but he played a significant number. And he's always had, I wouldn't say he's had an injury record, but there'd be periods where he picks up a muscle injury, he'd be out for 3 or 4 games and that kind of thing. And obviously, as he's getting older, it's that recovery is harder. Potentially, he could best him in the Europa games, play him in the league games. So there's that aspect. That's the unknown. I think is the interesting thing. Obviously, I know we're talking about defence. I think that they're hard. Like I think for your point, James, is there's a lot of other teams. There's a lot of other teams around there who are either cheaper or the same. Who, if you're looking at, say, a United, you're looking at what is arguably going to be one of the top 4 teams. You've got a defender there at the same price as Cresswell. That's where it becomes difficult, and the fixtures come in. The interesting thing on fixtures, because when I looked at our Europa games, is who we actually play after the Europa games. So we play, I think the one in games on the 16th of September. So after that, we play Southampton, I think. United. Sorry, it's United. And then we've got the next Europa games in October. We play Spurs, then we play Liverpool, and then we play City. So we've got four games directly after the Europa game. So in a way, that's not bad, because those games are games you could potentially lose. So I'd rather play the harder teams who you could lose to anyway. That might give us a better chance in the league when we do have the so-called easier teams.
Yeah, to add a point to the fixtures, just looking right ahead, the longest spell you've got without playing any of the big 4 plus Arsenal, Tottenham and Leicester is between game week 6 and 8. And 2 of those 3 fixtures are Leeds away and Everton away. Yeah. And that's what I mean about there's never a stretch. It's actually game week 18 to 22. You've got a nice stretch of fixtures over the Christmas period and stuff. But before that, there's never a stretch where you look at it and think from the defensive perspective, I've got a run here where West Ham might get 3-4 clean sheets in a row. Or I think if you're going with the West Ham players, you are doing it purely on a consistency basis. So I think the psyche in it is if you're starting with a Coufal or a Cresswell, you're intending to hold these guys. They're almost like, I don't want to say dead to you, but essentially that. You're not getting them in because you think, I like West Ham's brilliant start. And the first 4 is not horrendous, right? Newcastle, Leicester, Palace, Southampton. It's not by any means. But I think you're getting Cresswells or Coufals in because you think, I want these players to run through for me. I'm not booking in a transfer for them. So you're looking for the consistency on which, with the amount of attacking returns, 20 attacking returns between the 2 of them last year. It's 1 every 2 games, isn't it, between them? They provide it. They provide that bit of consistency. I'm just concerned on the clean sheet record towards the back end of last season. That's the biggest thing putting me off.
Yeah, I think that's where the goalkeeper situation might help. It might give Fabianski a little bit of a focus, because he was the clear number 1, really. If he was fit, he played. Where now he's got that. I don't think he's going to be thinking, I better play really well, I'm going to get dropped straight away. But if he has a bad game, then he has another bad game, then he knows that he's not got that cushion of, I'm still going to be in goal. So it just gives him maybe it ups his game as well. But you haven't got that competition for places, so that doesn't help in the defence side of things. But yeah, I agree. I agree with what you're saying. I think it's one of those. In 4 games, you could look back and they could have 3 clean sheets, and you could be thinking, I wish I picked one, or I'm glad I picked one. You're not going to know until after the event. You can't really look at it and think, I've got a good chance of getting. If you play the percentages, there's teams with better fixtures who've got better chances of clean sheets, but you have got the attacking returns to go into it as well.
Which one do you fancy starting with most? If you had to start with one now.
If I had to start for someone in defensive, I'd say Coufal. As soon as he's presumably he's fit, I'll probably look at I know we're playing Atalanta at the weekend. I'll see if he started that, because obviously he's now back in training. As long as he's not missing the first game or not, that's where I think team news comes into it. But if he was playing, he would be my least risky pick, I would say, out of all of them.
I've got Ben White sitting in there at the moment and $500,000 in the bank. And if we get to the day before that Friday the 13th, and I've still got that $500,000, I think, do you know what? I don't want to save it for just contingency. I may just upgrade Ben White to Coufal. I'm with you, Chris. I think Coufal is the obvious choice of the defenders to start with.
But I'm not sure if I'm actually going to start with a West Ham defender, if I'm honest, because it's a transfer that I know I might be making. And when you've got someone like, even to use yours, I mean, when you say you've got someone like Ben White, you've got a $4.5 million player at Arsenal who could potentially do better. You're potentially looking at a top 6 team there, aren't you? For 4.5. So you've got this. But yeah, if I had But then, I think you've got the wild card. People do tend to play the wild card early. I think the first 4 fixtures, if you're going to get, you've got teams there, Newcastle, Palace, we don't really know how they're going to be scoring wise. Southampton, we don't know how they're going to be this year. But you've got maybe 2 teams out of those that maybe will find it harder to score, certainly a lot of goals. So you've got two chances, 2 home games. Leicester's a hard one. But like you say, there's not a consistent run of games. That's the biggest issue.
It kind of depends what you want. Because I actually think the choice between Coufal and Cresswell is quite close. I actually think Cresswell's probably got more to go, actually, in terms of might be on free kicks, didn't score last season. Obviously, same applies to Coufal. But Coufal had a couple of chances. It never looks like he's going to finish when he gets there. Whereas Cresswell's obviously got a rocket on a shot of him if it's used. But to use a Coufal comparison, we've spoken about the fixtures and the fact it's never brilliant for you. Whereas Brighton, quite well documented, great first 8 or so. And Lewis Dunk at the same price outscored Coufal last year. So if you're looking on a short-term basis and you're looking to perhaps wildcard early, I don't actually see why you wouldn't go, say, Dunk over Coufal, particularly now the Brighton assets, and we'll speak with Sam Murray about this more when we have him on. Obviously, Lamptey's probably out game week 1. Ben White's gone to Arsenal. So if Dunk is going to be fit, and there's every chance he'll be back for their friendly this weekend, then personally, I think I'd go Dunk over Coufal to start with. And then you comparing, as I said, Cresswell to Shaw Dean. I think the only way I'd see myself starting with Cresswell is probably start with the other 2 as well. And I've got to get Trent in there as well. This is getting difficult, mate.
I think if you don't, personally, I think if you look at the first 8 games, maybe, or first 6 games, I think if you don't start with the West Ham defender, you're probably not going to bring him in.
It's part of the point.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it comes down to. It comes down to your team structure. But like you say, you've got Dunk there. If he's fit, he's not a bad. He's a good player to have, isn't he? For the first 8 games, they've got some nice fixtures in there. I think the thing with Coufal is he's got potential to score more than he did last season. I think a few more of those returns he could get a few more assists. Maybe eventually he'd get a couple of goals. I don't know. I know you say the thing about Cresswell, but I just think that he's always got that risk of injury as it gets in or getting knocked. Yeah. But you can never you can bank the points, and it's that extra $500,000. Sometimes that can be precious, can't it, at the start of the season?
I think I'll probably start without, unless I would decide Coufal over Dunk. Perhaps if I go with, say, Robert Sanchez in goal instead. That's the sort of combination. If I think, I've got the Brighton coverage there early on, then I think that's the only way I'd see me going Coufal is if I start with Robert Sanchez in goal. You have to kind of pair that with other clubs. Otherwise, like if I went with, say, Backman and Foster in goal, I think I'd go Dunk over Coufal. And actually, for those who are looking to wildcard as early as, say, the first international break, and a lot will, you'd even look at people like Mings and Target. Mings got the same amount of points as Coufal last year. Target outscored him. They've got a brilliant opening 3 fixtures. So it actually becomes difficult to fit in the West Ham players unless I think they're taking a longer term view.
I think it does defensively. It certainly does. I think that's the hardest thing. It's you can't pick everyone, and there's other players that you could keep for longer. I think that's probably what it comes down to, really.
I have a midfield question. If we can get off the defenders,
that sounds good.
Same price. Yeah, we're going in circles, aren't we? Same price. Soucek, Benrahma. Who'd you fancy more, Chris? I mean, Benrahma's probably the better looking out of the 2, but I mean, on the football pitch.
I would say, I'd probably say Benrahma, because you always want to have someone who can score and is attacking and exciting to watch. I think the problem with Soucek was he started really well, and he got to that sort of mark of where I sort of thought he might be, the 8 to 10 mark of returns. And then the second half of the season, he didn't seem to be getting in those positions as much. Now, I don't know if that's because of Lingard. It may be because Lingard was making a lot of those. He was in and around the box a lot more, but he just didn't seem to be getting into the box as much as he was in the first half of the season as much. So I'd probably go Benrahma. I mean, the thing with Benrahma is I think he's going to be exciting to watch, and I think he'll have a better season. But what sort of goals is he going to score? Yeah, he's not going to score a goal like he did against Brentford from outside the box, curling it in past the keeper, which is a great goal, but he's not going to score them every week. So, you know,
every other week will do, though.
yeah, every other week I do. But I think he will definitely have a better season. It's just whether that translates into the actual goals and points. But I think he's going to have more influence and he's going to be a much better player. I'd go with Benrahma just for that. It'd be good to watch someone like that and have someone like that rather than just someone getting on the.
We always have stories every season of a player who's had a difficult first year with a new club and then second year explodes. There's always one or two. And when I kind of categorize players like that in my mind, I think who could really step on? I think it would be difficult to say he underperformed last year, but who could really kick on this year and from an FPL perspective, really punch above their value? Benrahma would be right near the top of the list for me of players who I think could do that.
I mean, when you compare him and Soucek directly, is Soucek going to get 15 goals as opposed to 9 or 10 goals? Probably not. Is Benrahma going to get 6 more goals and maybe 3 or 4 returns? But he could get even more than that. He could get double figures. Who knows? He could. I think he's got, like you say, he's got that. The potential is there for him to break out. I mean, I'm personally actually looking at Bowen at the start, only because I think he I think will have a better season than he did last season in terms of returns. And I think he is on corners on the right hand side. And I think Moyes he plays most of the games. I think that's the.
Is he going to stay? I guess the first question would be heavily linked with Liverpool, isn't it?
I don't buy that. I don't see why. As much as I like him, I don't think he's good enough for Liverpool. I don't see how he would be going to Liverpool. I don't know where that's come from, and I don't know how much truth's in it. I mean, if he did, but I couldn't blame him if he went to Liverpool. But I'd be surprised if he was going to Liverpool, if I'm honest.
Can I summarise this midfield question for you, James? To avoid.
Please.
Avoid.
Really?
And the reason being, Soucek and Rice are sitting in deep. When he was 5 million, no problem. When he's 6, not interesting. Now, say we play a 4-2-3-1. So you've got a left-sided attacking midfielder. Fornals, I think, will be favoured just because of his work rate and he helps track back and what he gives to the team. Who plays in that number 10 role? Is it Benrahma? Is it Lanzini? And if the rumours on Pereira are true and he comes in for 20 odd million, is Pereira going to play that number 10? If Pereira plays that number 10, then Benrahma's not really interesting. I don't know, would Benrahma play over Fornals on the left? I don't think so, because Fornals offers so much defensive stability as well. Having said that, in the pre-season friendlies, Lanzini's played in and dropped in a little bit to kind of make a midfield 3 rather than a number 10. And you got Bowen on the right-hand side. But if Bowen leaves, Benrahma might then shift out to the right-hand side. And if Bowen leaves and Benrahma plays on the right, then I think Benrahma is interesting. But other than that, there's just so many permutations, combinations, especially even if Pereira comes in, that I'd feel uncomfortable knowing who's going to play where and offer what to want to risk £6.5 million when you've got Rafinha's the same price as Bowen, Harrison's the same price as some of these guys, Ismail Assar is the same price as some of these guys. I just can't. They're all good players. They all offer a lot to the team, and I think because of that, we'll have a good attacking threat. But they'll all be confusing from an FPL point of view because I don't know who's going to play where in what system, and it will change week to week. And that's why I look at them and I think, yeah, they're all probably worth £6 million, but not in my team because of that. And I agree with you on the Benrahma thing, what you're saying, James, that he could break out and have a great season. I could see him taking some of the set pieces off Cresswell as well, but I'd need to see it first.
I think the thing with what you can only, a lot of those, they're questions. I think they're valid questions, but I think there may be season-long questions or maybe in a month's time questions, which you'll get.
Yeah.
If you're looking at at least the first 4 games, then I think, I know Bowen didn't play in the friendly, but he had played most of the other games. I think if he's staying, which I do expect him to play, Moyes trusts him. If Antonio picks up a knock and we haven't signed a striker at that point, or the striker's own, even if he signs a striker next week, he's not, depending on who it is, are they going to be coming in straight away? He's already played that role with with him. Might not be as effective as Antonio. Well, he's not as effective as Antonio, obviously, but he's got value elsewhere than just on the right hand side. And I think his position is pretty safe in the team. Benrahma has got the breakout side of it. I think he's got the excitement, but he's also got that element where he's either going to get subbed on, subbed off, dropped.
Because Bowen gets subbed off every game.
Bowen's 70-minute man, isn't he?
No, I mean, that's about what I mean is that 70 minutes. Yeah, okay, he run himself into the ground for 70 minutes, but he'd be playing every single week. He'd be starting. Where Benrahma, you've got, like you say, depending on how we set up his place. If he starts scoring 3 or 4 goals, he becomes undroppable, doesn't he? Because you can't not play him. But we don't know that at this stage of the season. We don't know until the season starts what's going to happen there.
I'd like to clarify a few things. One, as per usual, this is being pre-recorded on Tuesday the 3rd. And you talking about Matheus Pereira made me think of that, Suj, because on Monday he released a statement saying that he wanted to go to this club in Qatar because they were offering some stupid amount of money. But apparently they can't afford him, which has now put him in a bit of limbo, actually. And he might end up staying at West Brom. If Bowen went and you didn't buy a replacement, and I'm sure you probably would, my impression of that would be that if you had to force someone to the right, it would probably be Fornals. I don't think Benrahma would go and play on that side. And the other thing that appeals to me on Benrahma is, would it be fair to say he only really broke into the team in the last few months of the season, like established himself? By which point, Jesse Lingard was obviously absolutely flying for you. And we spoke about it lots at the time, the fact he kind of really picked up this talisman mantle for you, that he was going to carry the team. Now, not that phone, Suj, I swear to God. The patrons just pissed themselves, every single one of them. I wonder if he might pick up that mantle a bit, because at the moment it looks like Lingard's not coming back, doesn't it?
No.
By the way, Chris, you've got about 48 hours from the time we record this to change the banner on your Twitter profile, mate, which has still got a picture in.
I know. I better change it.
So it makes me think, who's going to pick up that creativity? Because one of Jesse's strengths was obviously that driving, running from central positions. And I think the person most capable of replicating that is probably Benrahma. So I wouldn't rule it out. I can't see me starting with him. And I think you're right, Suj. On Bowen, at 6.5, it's decent. But I think you're right. Like, when you do, it's the same thing. Exactly what we just went through with, say, Soucek and Dunk. When you go Benrahma versus Rafinha, Harrison versus Benrahma, it's not really a case at the moment, because actually, ironically, we're talking about going with the West Ham players because of their consistency. But in the case of the 2 Leeds players, you know their consistency. Yeah. The others we're less sure about.
If Bowen was to leave, I mean, the talk is Yarmolenko may be on his way out, but as of recording, he's not left yet. So I think if Bowen didn't play, he might see some more minutes on the right-hand side.
If you put Yarmolenko in a yellow shirt, it might be interesting.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do. Our away shirt should have been yellow.
Suj has only ever seen him kick the ball with his right foot when he plays for Ukraine.
For Ukraine, other times it's only left foot. It's incredible what he can do with his right foot for Ukraine and can't with his left.
I thought it was because he had a prosthetic. I thought he had a prosthetic leg. I thought he didn't have a right leg. That's why I didn't use it.
The other note, of course, on Bowen, just finally, for I think we talked about Antonio a bit, is should something happen to Antonio, as it stands, it's probably Bowen's going to go up front, isn't it?
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
And
well, I think it's by default. There is no one else.
That suddenly might change the game for him. I think these West Ham players shouldn't be far from your watch list. But I think at the moment, if I was to start with one, it would be the man up front.
Yep, I can understand that.
There's only one choice in the forwards at the moment. I just had a cheeky look at his ownership, and I can understand that it's quite low because there's so many options in that space. So you the ownership gets spread amongst your Wilsons and Watkins and everybody else that we know is in that bracket. But he's only at 13.5% ownership, Antonio. For me, I I think he's locked in now for me.
He's a good price bracket. He's a good price bracket because as we all know, if he scores a goal, he'll often go on little runs where he'll have shots. He'll have 2 or 3 shots in the game easily.
And he's been scoring pre-season. He's looked fit pre-season as well.
So I think he's a good. He's a good
thighs are
price
nice
bracket.
and they're ready, James. Thunder thighs are
he's
looking
primed.
He needs some baggier shorts badly. What is he doing? He plays football like he's on the pole waiting for whatever girl's waiting for him after the game. But ironically, and it's kind of been the theme of this particular podcast, what do we always say about Antonio, Suj?
Fitness.
Nah, don't worry about the fixtures.
Oh, don't worry. Yeah, that too.
He score against anyone.
Yeah, that's true. He will. He can score. And the thing is, he's been scoring lots of different types of goals. You know, he's definitely been improved under Moyes as a finisher. I think I've got him in mind, but obviously I know that's some of that's bias. But he's easy to move off. He's not a difficult price point to move off. You've got other players to come in. A lot. I mean, my thoughts with West Ham players is I don't know if I'd be keeping them for the whole season. I doubt very much I would be keeping them for the whole season. There's probably
You're definitely not going to have Antonio for 38 games.
No.
There's no chance in playing 38 games.
But you know, the fixtures, sort of like you say, there'll be other teams that come in. There'll be other players that I probably want. So it could well end up that I won't have any. But starting wise, I think they've got decent enough fixtures which they can score goals in. Newcastle, Leicester, Palace, and Southampton in the first four. Which, you know, there's a goal or two in those games potentially. So it's worth starting. And I know you're saying on the Newcastle one, obviously if Dubravka and Darlow are out and they haven't got, you know, whoever their keeper is, if they get another lone keeper in, whoever that may be,
will be fielding long range shots from Said Benrahma.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Antonio's a good shout. I mean, he's like you say, he's never going to be a season keeper because he's never going to last. He's never going to play 38 games or 35 games even. But at the start of the season, I see no reason not to put him in. He's as good as any of the other players in that price bracket.
I think when you carry Michail Antonio in your FPL team, you need to constantly know what your contingency is.
Yeah.
Because it's not being horrible to say. Like, he will not stay fit for 38 games, unfortunately. And it's because he wears shorts that are too tight. I'm absolutely convinced about it. Mind you, if I had thighs like that, me and you should be walking around in wide fronts, wouldn't we?
Yeah. Speedos all day, every day.
I think he's 50-50 for me. I mean, it's very close. Again, because so many people at that valuation. I suspect what I end up with, Watkins is a definite for me because the first three. I suspect Antonio might fall down in terms of whether I feel secure with Iheanacho or not. Might be what the final decision becomes for myself.
Is he 7.5 as well?
Yeah, same price.
See, that $500,000 that I mentioned earlier that gets me Ben White Sufa, if I keep it in my pocket, it gets me Antonio to Bamford or Calvert-Lewin instead. And so I'd maybe keep that card up my sleeve rather than spending that money defensively and not be able to make that up move rather than having to make a sideways move to Jimenez or whoever else. It may be Wilson.
It's an interesting price bracket because there's a lot of value between sort of 7.5 and 8. What's Bamford? He's 8.5, isn't he?
8, I think he's.
Yeah. So you've got some players that did it last year who could well replicate it again this season. It's just who hits the ground running. That's you can never really tell, can you? Captain hindsight always comes into it. You never know which one's gonna fire. I mean, Everton got a new manager. Aston Villa probably one of the strongest, I'd say, out of those to say there's an argument to have Watkins, but then you've got other players who you could put in instead from Villa. But yeah, it's difficult to get them all in. But yeah, I'd like to start with Antonio. It's nice to have a player from your own team. Adds a bit more fun to it, even if it does make you give you a shit rank.
You
at the
might
end of the
have
season.
heard. I might go with Heung-min Son. You might have heard.
I think you might have mentioned it.
Yeah. One final question for you before we finish up, you Chris. Declan Rice, staying?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see any reason. Probably famous last words why he would leave. Obviously, we're in Europe. I think he's not going to not get in the England team because he's playing for West Ham. I think if he was going to leave, it would be after the World Cup next year. If there's a time that, or before the World Cup or whenever, after the end of next season, because I know the World Cup's slightly sort of kind of screws in the middle of the season after. But I would say I'd be very, very confident that he would be staying, unless someone come in and actually offered 100 million, which I don't really see anyone doing, because they want to spend 100 million on a Kane, a Grealish, Sancho. Haaland gets mentioned. Are these teams going to have another 100 million to spend on a defensive midfielder? If they sign one of those other players, then maybe, but I don't think they will.
I think there's a little bit of a consciousness at the moment that Chelsea are obviously, at time of recording, trying to buy a forward. It's not going to be Kane. They've obviously got a long-held interest in Haaland. We've heard they've bid for Romelu Lukaku. All three of them players are going to be very difficult for Chelsea to get this summer. And it might be that suddenly the transfer budget is burning a hole for this summer.
Yeah,
and they decide to use it now on Rice and play Havertz as a false nine, continue to use Werner. Maybe Tammy Abraham will stay, for example. The other note of caution, I think, just finally on the West Ham midfielders like Bowen, etc. You are obviously looking to add to the squad in that position, and it might be that it doesn't happen before game week 1. And I think you always have to be conscious when you're buying players like Bowen, Benrahma, that they may be looking to add in that area of the squad, and that may affect them as assets. And again, when you compare that with Leeds and Rafinha and Harrison, you don't see them looking to try and add in those areas. Those guys are going to play. They don't have the competition in terms of squad depth in quite the same way either. And it becomes difficult to go with them. And I think it, for me, would be Coufal is a possible but unlikely. Antonio is probably a 50-50, I think.
I think some of the West Ham players, I think when you compare to Leeds, I think they've got some, FPL-wise, they've got some very good assets like Rafinha. If I was having to pick a dead team, and I would be picking the Leeds players. But start of the season, Leeds got Man United and Everton. Yeah, they can get attacking returns against those teams, but it just comes down to personal choice, doesn't it? But I'm thinking short term. In a lot of my thoughts of West Ham, I'm thinking short term is FPL wise. I'm not thinking them as season keepers, because I think there's too many variables and there's too many unknowns at the moment.
Did you see that segue you just did there?
Indeed, he did.
Amazing, Chris. You didn't plan that. Chris doesn't have a clue what we're talking about.
No.
I hope Suj does, or this is going to come out weird.
No, I get it completely. I also had another segue in that there's a 6.5 million midfielder that we need to talk about. There's very little talked about in James Ward-Prowse, which is the segue to where we'll be going straight after this pod. Chris, last question. Where do you think we will finish? What would you be happy with come game 38?
I'd be happy with 8th. I'd want a minimum of top half.
No, exactly. My thoughts is that top 8 would be a good achievement, and of course, just replicating the same effort, style of play, and consistency as well through the seasons.
Yeah, I'd want to finish. I want to get into the knockout stages, the Europa.
And, I thought you could say win it. Come on, man, we've got to win the Europa League.
obviously, but
we shall see.
We shall see.
And where can the listeners, the few that don't maybe haven't listened to you on Clash the Correspondence before, find you on Twitter and what have you?
I can't remember what my handle is now. So
this is what James is there for. What's Chris's handle?
FPL_Sky Addict. You lot are unbelievable.
I was going to say the other way around. I was going to say Sky, and then I was going to say it the other way around. So I would have got it wrong. So if I'm going somewhere else, some poor sort of be getting all these questions. Yeah. If anyone's got any questions or whatever, I mean, I wouldn't say I have loads of knowledge, but I do try and keep up with the news and stuff, and what's going on, and behind the scenes as much as I can from obviously the only reliable source that's out there that everyone knows. But hopefully news comes through soon. So if everyone wants to ask anything or got any opinions, whatever, shoot them across.
Good man. Always a pleasure, Chris. Good luck for the season.
Thank you. Mate. Yeah, and you guys. Take care.
James, explain that season keepers segue for the listeners that might not get it either. Where are we going next?
Next up, South Coast, Southampton with clean sheet wipeout from the Season Keepers podcast, who many of you might have heard during our takeover week. He's our new Saints correspondent. We're going to be talking to him about, that brutal fixture list they start with. I think there's concern on the South Coast about Southampton. And interestingly, so we often have a conversation about, it's difficult to say who'll go down this year, and we always skip them. Well, I'm not sure we should. So be an interesting conversation with Matt and talking about Tottenham's new striker, Danny Ings. It was really weird. I've said that 48 hours before I've released this because who knows? Kane might be a Chelsea player. He might be a West Ham player.
Nice. Well, lead in that podcast. Lead with the question. You think you're going down, Matt? And let's see where.
No, I'm going to lead with a question of: do you think Danny Ings is going to Tottenham, mate?
Excellent, listeners. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening to the podcast, and you'll get notified as soon as the rest of the Correspondent Week pods go out. Other than that, keep well, stay safe. Chapping out.
Thanks, Chris. Be nice to each other, everyone. Cue music, please, man child.